Anthony, thank you very much for sitting down with me. We're here at the annual meeting of UPOV in Geneva, and your country, Canada, is a member of UPOV. Why is it so important for a country to be part of a global organization for plant breeders' rights?
Well, I think there's plenty of benefits to being a part of the UPOV community. One is you have a consistent legislation for protection of intellectual property rights for plant varieties. So very much you can have a model type system that really is the same in most other countries. So there's this idea of reciprocity. So you can make filings in other UPOV member countries, other UPOV member countries can make filings in your country, and you're afforded the same treatment. So that harmonization is critically important. Because plant breeding companies make investments and put varieties all over the world, so that consistent treatment is very important. The other part that's very appealing about it is it's an open-ended system of innovation. So things like the breeder's exemption and the researcher's exemption means that if there's an innovative plant variety out there, another breeder can better it. So it really drives investment and innovation in the sector. And for Canada, that's critically important.
Mm-hmm. And recently, your country, Canada, joined the latest act of the convention, the 1991 Act. What were the main reasons to join this act?
You're absolutely correct. So in 2015, in February of that year, we amended our plant breeders' rights law, our domestic plant breeders' rights legislation, to conform to UPOV 91. And then we went through the process of ratification in June of that year. And really, the drivers were several for doing that. First of all, our government of Canada has a real priority to increase the productivity of our agricultural sector, and particularly our export markets. We are a farming nation. We have a strong agricultural sector. We see plenty of growth opportunities through trade for the next few years. So a very ambitious agenda. In fact, to drive up by over 2% over the next 10 years, our proportion of GDP that's in agriculture. Mm-hmm. And quite frankly, there's no better way to do that than to get investment in plant breeding, because those innovations amplify and magnify up through the value chain. Mm-hmm. So producers benefit, there's higher levels of productivity, higher levels of yield. You can export more product. You can have more end-use characteristics that are in demand by the market. It really is an important way to grow our agricultural sector. So that's the predominant reason why we moved to UPOV 91.
Excellent. And since you joined, what have you seen? What's the main impact?
Well, it's been actually quite remarkable in just a very short period of time. So certain crop types like the cereals, wheat, very much dominated by the public sector, and we have some fantastic public sector breeding programs that provide innovative new varieties. But they've also used the UPOV system, the new PBR, to improve their rates of remuneration, so collecting royalties to sustain their programs. But I think more dramatic than that is the private sector investment. So Bear Crop Science, which now, of course, their seed industry is turned over to BASF, they've made significant investments in wheat breeding. They established a footprint in Canada and some breeding station. Mm-hmm. Lima Grain as well has entered into some partnership, has now a footprint in Canada. I visited their facilities this summer. Very impressive for a short period of time. So massive amounts of capital investment by the private sector, now that the intellectual property environment is much improved. So that was really the most remarkable. And we're starting to see the data come in. Since 2012 to move to 2017, a 237% increase in investment in wheat breeding. Yeah. $13.2 million investment in pulses. Wow. In a short period of time. So overall, a much larger investment footprint by the private sector.
Yeah. Those are massive numbers.
It exceeded our expectations for sure.
Obviously, that means a boost to the breeding of these crops also.
It means a boost to the breeding, but it also means a boost to producers. Now, of course, that takes a little bit of time. Sure. You establish the breeding programs first, and it might be several years before the varieties come out. But there is no doubt, and we've seen this in other sectors like canola and corn and soybeans. When you get the investment, producers get more choice, and the rates of yield and genetic gain improve, and the products. So that, it really puts the farmers in a good position to access ever improving genetics, and that's critically important to their productivity.
And any other changes that you would like to highlight?
Well, we're in the process of conducting consultations right now. We have what we call regulation making authority, so we can make changes to our regulations. And what we're very much interested in is models that can get a better rate of return for producers or for breeders on farm safe seeds. So something like Australia has an endpoint royalty system, the UK has a farm safe seed royalty system. We're exploring that right now. So we're engaged in consultations with the value chain as a whole, so the seed industry and producers, and those are starting actually in November and running through December. So that's a new development on the horizon, and again, the idea is to drive up the levels of investment in those sectors.
Yeah. That's very impressive. We also know that there's lots of countries that do not have plant breeders' rights. Do you think the absence of plant breeders' rights prevents or creates a barrier for seed sector growth?
I do, and we have firsthand experience with that. So we joined on to UPOV-78, and that's the previous version of the convention, and we did that in the early 1990s. And that worked quite well for us. But then we reached a point in time where we weren't seeing any more additional investment, and we were asking the questions, why is that so? And really it is around the intellectual property environment wasn't strong enough. And in order to attract more investment, you have to have a stronger intellectual property environment. So I really think that we've seen empirical evidence firsthand that you get a growth in investment, the number of varieties, the diversity of varieties, and that is all to the benefit of the farmer at the end of the day. So strongly encourage countries who are considering, and of course we always are open to providing assistance and our advice and sharing our experiences, that this is critically important for their agricultural development.
So once a country joins UPOV or a plant breeders' rights system, do those breeders then sell more or different types of varieties than before?
Yeah, usually you see an expansion with the number of varieties, different types. So we see a sort of segmentation, exploring more niche markets, high value varieties for specific end uses and products. And we see the overall varietal diversity increase. So to give you an example, we start seeing applications for hemp. We see mustard varieties increasing. So the Brassica carinatas, we see some interesting new things like Camelina sativa. So we're seeing a growth not only in the large scale crops, the wheats, the soybeans, things like that, but also some of what we would call minor crops.
Wonderful. Well, that's a great increase in diversity.
It absolutely is, and it's something that's often overlooked. Our history in Canada, especially in our western part, is one of growing wheat, and we've seen that with new incentives to invest, in research and development. We're seeing this diversity of pulses and soybeans now migrating, and canola is very dominant in Western Canada. So you're getting this nice cropping diversity that is happening.
So what would you like to recommend to countries that don't have plant breeders' rights yet?
Well, I think I would say that our process served us very well. We did a lot of research in advance, so we had conducted impact studies. We examined other countries' legislation. We looked at certain very useful tools that are available on the UPOV website, such as the impact study of moving to PVP. So we took a very deliberate and evidence-based process to arrive there. And I would suggest that other countries do the same. Do your homework and then figure out the benefits. And if it provides a good value proposition, you move in that direction.
But I also hear that it's not easy. There's certain barriers. What kind of barriers are countries facing when they want to join?
Well, I think that's a very good question, and there's several barriers. This is a very obscure legislation that people don't really understand that well, and I would say, producers, as well as even the bureaucracy or at the political level. So. Our experience is if you want to move in this direction and adopt UPOV 91, it's so critical to try to unpack what it means, but also demystify. There's a lot of incorrect information that is out there, such as intellectual property protection only benefits large multinationals. Quite the opposite. We strengthen our intellectual property. The public sector breeders actually have benefited the most in the short term. And we see this diversity of small and medium size and micros. So this nice ecosystem of different types of breeders. And that's not often heard. So there does have to be some advocacy around explaining, what is the true purpose of UPOV. And that is, to provide a framework for intellectual property protection that benefits all of society. So breeders and farmers.
Interesting. There are some certain barriers, and I believe your country also had to overcome some barriers to join 91. What would it take to overcome those barriers?
Well, I think having a good strategy and communicating evidence, factual messaging versus there's a lot of what we call mythical messaging out there that isn't quite true. Things like, it reduces varietal diversity and genetic diversity. No, we've seen that firsthand. It's only for large multinational corporations. Quite the opposite. It levels the playing field. Very good for the public sector to provide sustainable funding. Very good for small and medium-sized enterprises who otherwise wouldn't be able to operate. So you really have to do a lot of work telling the truth about what happens under that system. And that's the key, because it is also challenging. Changing legislation isn't easy. And often you have to get the attention at the senior political level that this is something important, worth pursuing. So.
Can't wait to hear more data of Canadian impact.
Yeah, I can't wait to share more data on the Canadian impact. No, we're very pleased with the results, Marcel, and we would recommend it to other countries as well.
Thank you very much, Mike.
My pleasure.